Hey guys, it's GED question of the daytime, and we've got here a problem that, a little algebra problem. Clearly, you see some X's, you see some Y's, but it's an algebra problem that actually looks a lot harder than it is. And so if you can get past just how gross it looks, you might find this problem really, really simple, especially if you have your handy dandy TI-30XS calculator. That's the calculator you get for the GED, and it will do most of the work for you. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to simplify this sucker by hand, but I'll also show you how to do it in a calculator. So let's take a look. This problem says evaluate. Evaluate just kind of means do all the math you can. I think of it, it's a synonym with the word simplifying. We're like obeying the symbols that we see when we do that. Like forwards math, like obedient math. Like if there's a times symbol, we'll multiply. Okay, so evaluate the expression below for x equals -1. That makes me cheer. Mystery solved. X isn't a mystery anymore. I know what he is. He's the number -1. And y equals -2. Again, another mystery solved. So this is the reason why I like this problem so much. Even though it looks a little ugly, like there's a lot to do, it's actually not even an algebra problem as soon as you do this first step. So the first step is what we call substitution. Anytime you're faced with an algebraic expression or equation, if there is a value that you know, like we know what x is and we know what y is, you should just go ahead and substitute in that value. You should take out the letter who was just holding the place for the number we didn't know and put in the number now that we know it. So I'm going to leave this 3 here. So I'm going to rewrite the 3 because I don't change numbers. But I am going to substitute in where I used to see an x. I'm going to write in my x value, and my x value is -1. Notice that I did put it in parentheses. Why? Because when 3 and x are shoved up together like this, all tight with nothing in between them, they are multiplying. Same thing here. We can see y is shoved up real tight, so it's also multiplying. So we will substitute out the y value. So we learned that y is equal to -2. So I don't have to call it mystery y anymore. I can call it -2. Now don't lose any symbols or operations from above, so I'll keep my square. I'll keep my minus. Ooh, I meant to do those in a different color. Sorry. So I'll keep my square from above and I'll keep my minus. But that x and that y, I don't have to keep those. Those aren't mysteries anymore. So I'll plug in an x. Now be very careful when you plug in negative numbers. Even if I'm not multiplying, I will often use parentheses so that I can see that I'm minusing a -1. We can see we have 2 minus signs in a row. Now you might say, Kate, that's not possible. But actually we will deal with that when we come to it. Right now, all I'm doing is substituting. And so x times y, so I get that times -2. Again, I'm not going to lose any signs or symbols, so I'll keep my plus and I'll keep my 2, plus 2. But I sure will substitute in x's value that I've learned for x. So instead of writing an x there, I am going to write, hold on, let me pick up the right color. I am going to write, -1 for x. Close that parentheses. Now notice the x was supposed to be squared. See my little 2 there? So I'll write a square there. And there's that last y. And I am going to substitute it in. A lot of times when I'm doing algebra, my students don't know where my numbers come from. They think I'm some kind of ninja that memorizes things. But no, I'm just looking at the line above me to know what to do. So I rewrote everything except all my x's and y's became -1s and -2s. Okay, now this is not algebra anymore. This is just one big, long, ugly order of operations problem. Now, I can do this by hand or I can type this in the calculator. If you had this problem on the GED, I promise you'd have a calculator. Okay, so that's great news. But I will still show you how to do it by hand because a lot of my students want to know. So let me work it by hand and then we can plug it into our TI to make sure that it works. Okay, so according to the order of operations, which is what the rules that I have to refer to anytime there's more than one thing to do in a math problem, and there's definitely more than one thing to do in this math problem. There's 4 steps to the order of operations. I sum them up with Gemma. The first one is to do any groupings you see. Now, I actually don't see any groupings. Students who learn GEMMA incorrectly, thinking that the first step is parentheses, will often tell me that they see some parentheses, so there must be some groupings. But look inside your parentheses. Like, for example, inside this first set of parentheses, there's just one number, -1. There's nothing to do in there. That's not a grouping. It's just one number. Same thing with the next parentheses. There's just one number. And the next parentheses and the next parentheses. Every single one of these parentheses has just one number. So there's no actual groupings to attack. So I can skip straight over that step and go to the next step, exponents. Now, remember that exponents are both the little floating numbers and, sorry, got a little bouncer here, the little floating numbers and their radicals. So I do see some of those little floating numbers, those powers or exponents here. So that'll be the first thing I simplify. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to do -2 to the second power. -2 to the second power means -2 times -2, and that gives me +4. And I'm also going to do -1 to the second power. -1 to the second power means -1 times -1, which would give me a +1. Great. So I did this and I did this, but the rest of the problem I haven't touched. Anytime you do an order of operations problem, you should drop down everything that you haven't done, and it should just fall onto the next line. It's a really bad habit some students have to skip this step, and then when they do, they lose negatives all over the place. They make all kinds of crazy errors. Believe me, it's worth the little bit of time that it takes. Okay, great. So I finished my exponents. Next thing in the order of operations is to do your multiplication and division. And I have some multiplication here, here, and here. And so I'm going to do all three of those multiplications all at once because I'm too lazy to do them in a bunch of steps. So let's do this. 3 times -1 is -3. And if I were to multiply -3 by 4, I'd get -12. So for multiplying the first group of numbers, I get -12. Now let's multiply the next group. -1 times -2 gives me +2. So I did that. Now for the next group, 2 times 1 times -2. 2 times 1 is 2, times -2 is -4. And now I will make sure that I drop down any signs or symbols that I have not yet used. So I have not yet used this minus sign, this one, so I'll drop it. And I've not yet used this plus sign, so I'll drop it. So there's my new problem. It's all addition and subtraction. -12 minus 2 plus -4. And that's the last step of the order of operations. So -12, take away 2. Well, I'm already in debt 12. I go back 2 more. I am at -14. And then if I go add another -4 to that, I'm going to end up at -18. -18. And I would have written that answer underneath. I just ran out of room. So if you're a mathematician, you would have wrote that equals -18 right on the bottom. Great. And that is the final answer here. Now, let's go ahead and check our work in a TI-30XS calculator. So here's my recommendation to all students. Do not pick up your calculator until you've done your beautiful substitution step. That was that first step where I plug the numbers in. Students who pick up a calculator without writing down their substitution most often drop parentheses, they drop negative signs, and they get a whole lot of nonsense. Once you've done your beautiful substitution step, feel free to pick up your TI-30XS calculator. You'll be able to type 3 and then you'll open a parentheses. You won't even bother with the times, you'll just open a parentheses. You can type it exactly the way it seems. Now make sure when you type this -1 that you use the negative sign. That's down there on the bottom of the calculator in parentheses. It's not the same as the minus sign. This calculator's a little stupid. It can't tell a minus. It doesn't know when a minus and a negative are different. So you have to know and use the 2 different buttons. So then I close my parentheses. Now I'll open up another parentheses, open parentheses, and again I'll type -2. -2, and I'll close that parentheses, close parentheses. Now to get the square here, you're going to need to type the x squared button. That's not the only way to do it, but it's the easiest way, x squared. After you have done that, we will type minus. This one is between numbers, so it's a minus. And then you can have that parentheses, -1, close parentheses, parentheses, -2, close parentheses, plus 2, open parentheses, negative 1, close parentheses, and again you see a square, so remember that's the x squared button, x squared, and then open parentheses, negative 2, and let's see if our order of operations work was right. Woohoo! My TI-30XS validated my order of operations work. This does indeed come to negative 18. Gorgeous. I hope this video made sense to you. If it didn't, or if you have any further questions, make sure that you do ask them in the comments, and look out for more evaluation questions soon.